Well, I don't have first-hand experience, right?
Yeah.
I have what's called anecdotal experience, which means talking to my students, talking to my coworkers, talking to my friends that I've made. And from my understanding is it's basically non-existent. There is no sex education in China. These are cultural differences,
Yeah.
right? And for many people in China, they want to hold on to their traditional culture and they don't want to become more westernized, right? And using American soft power to influence your culture. So for international students, it's not a very good policy because you're going to be going into a situation where everyone else is much more mature in this area and has much more experience than you do. And you may, especially for women, for girls, you may be put in positions you don't quite understand and could end up being hurt in different ways. So these kind of rules, I understand, are in place to protect traditional cultural values, but specifically for international students, it really does more harm than good. Well, there are some people who don't like the content of sex education because sex education in America, which we usually call health class, you usually take it for one year in middle school and 1 year in high school. And it covers more than just sex education. It covers a lot of things like nutrition, keeping your body right, what type of things harm your body. So it covers a lot of stuff. In America, some parents get upset when they include things like sexual orientation, when they talk about alternative lifestyles. But it's pretty well accepted that health class should cover sex education, which means the basics of human reproduction. And everybody basically agrees to this. So you are first introduced to, usually in 4th or 5th grade, they will separate the boys, they will separate the girls, you'll go into different rooms, and you'll have a male teacher for the boys and a female teacher for the girls, and they talk about not only the reproductive organs of that group, but also the other groups. So boys have to learn how the girl parts work, and girls have to learn how the boy parts work. And that's the first introduction. Then by middle school, you actually take what's called health class. And sexual reproduction is part of that. And there's a lot of other things like nutrition. When they instituted this in America, they saw a 20% jump in 10 years in life expectancy because people started realizing, okay, hygiene was very important. It'll help me live longer. And it started curling back the incidences of sexually transmitted diseases. Now, why I think sex education is more important for Chinese people currently is the government's done a good job for a long time of keeping out diseases like AIDS, but it's starting to skyrocket in China. More and more people are being infected by this disease because people don't understand the proper precautions because they're not being told, and their parents don't know because their parents weren't told. So this becomes a public health issue and a public health crisis, and since education is usually public, that's the best way to get the information out there. Well, Europeans are much more open with sex than Americans are. Americans are becoming more open about sex, but for a long time we went through the Victorian era in European history, and in America was this closing off yourself to those type of topics, and we don't talk about those things. And especially someone from Texas in America, we're much more conservative. So like we don't talk about certain things in what we call mixed company with boys and girls. Boys can talk about this separately, and girls can talk about it separately. We don't talk about it together. But our society is liberalizing. It's becoming more and more open. But it wasn't that long ago when I was your age where this was something we all giggled about and in health class when we talked about it, but we didn't really talk about it with our friends. It's changing, and that's a good thing. Well, you have to be very careful because the first thing most of you students want to do is go online and read stuff on the internet. But you have to be very careful about what websites you go to. Right? You need to go to reputable medical websites and get medical information. Don't watch pornography because that's not real life. That's pretend. Unfortunately, the West, and the reason why pornography is blocked in many countries like China is because it has a negative impact on what people's opinions and ideas of sexuality is. So there are dangers when you're trying to go out there and get information. You have to be very careful. There's nothing wrong with asking adults. Now, of course, your parents are the first place you should go to, right? Those are the first people you should ask, but many of your parents don't know because they didn't receive sexual education either. So then it's going to a medical professional, talking to a doctor, going to having a physical checkup and saying, look, I have some questions on how my body works. There's some things I don't understand. And, you know, again, be very, very careful about looking on the internet and make sure you're going to a medically based website, okay? Because there's a lot of stuff out there that may not necessarily be true.